Hi everyone, my name is Corey Lennon and I'm the Resident Director in the Cura Residential Learning Community.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chan Tai, and I'm the Faculty Director in Cura RLC.
And we are here today to tell you a little bit more about Cura, but since we are in our private offices, we are going to go ahead and take our masks off. But since our theme here in Cura is well-being, we wanted to make sure to highlight that wearing a mask at this point is essential. Oops. There we go. Okay. So like I said, I am the resident director in Cura. That means that I am a full-time master's level professional that lives in the residence hall. You might have seen that in some of the other orientation videos. But I live in the hall with my partner Drake and our dog. She is a Cocker Spaniel. Her name is Ella. My office in Cura is right off the lobby. So if we are in person, that's where you can find me. If we are not, I'm available via a Google Voice number and email, and we'll always be here to support students, regardless of how we see you in the fall. On a personal level, I love to bake, cook, read, and hike. You can see a photo of us hiking. And I love to do anything crafty. And like I said, I'm here to support you in your first year at SCU, just in general. Anything you might encounter, you can reach out to me for support in dealing with that.
And I'm Dr. Chan Tai. I study communication and public health. My home department on campus is in the communication department. So in that department, I teach classes. So I'm kind of just a regular faculty member like other faculty members, but I have a secondary role on campus where I'm a live-in faculty member in Cura RLC. So I also have an office off of the lobby, and depending on sort of what things look like in the fall, generally I'm part of like programming in the hall. I create programs to sort of help students navigate this transition more on the academic side. So if you have questions about like registering for classes, or every student is enrolled in a CTW section, like I can kind of talk through things with you. So more academic related questions, exploring majors, questions about just advising advice. If I don't know the answer, I can always direct you to another resource on campus. So that's sort of my role. I also live in the building, and I'm a member of the JED Campus Program Committee, which is a committee focused on improving the environment at Santa Clara to promote student mental health. So I live with Prince and Bowie, my two Maltipoo dogs. I think you just saw Prince like circling in the chair behind me. He likes to nap a lot. And I love live music, which sadly I haven't gotten to go to any shows in like 4 or 5 months, which is sad for me. I also love to cook. I love to travel, which I also haven't been able to do during this time. But again, I'm kind of like another adult in the building. And if we're not in person, just another adult that you can reach out to if you have any questions about anything at all.
So I wanted to share a little bit about our theme, which I alluded to earlier. Cura is named what it is because of the Jesuit value of cura personalis, which means care for the whole person. So that value is fundamental to Santa Clara as an institution and is what we base our entire community around. So when we talk about care for the whole person in Cura, we're talking about 8 dimensions of well-being. This is the model that we've used to really break down holistic well-being or care for the whole person into kind of bite-sized areas that you can take a look at and take some action in to improve your own well-being. And you can see those on your screen. Social well-being is one, environmental well-being, occupational well-being, which can be your vocation and or the way that you, or the jobs that you seek out, the way that you earn a living, spiritual well-being, financial well-being, emotional well-being, which is often where kind of the traditional way we think of mental health falls, intellectual well-being, which is really key to your experience as a student, and then physical well-being, which is often kind of the part of wellness that is most emphasized, thinking about moving your body, eating nutritious foods, getting good sleep, caring for the physical body that you live in. So these 8 dimensions are how we approach holistic well-being in Cura. And I wanted to draw your attention to something that we would normally do with you during orientation, which is just a really basic reflection on these different areas. How are you living out these 8 different parts of your well-being in your life right now? It really is your perception of that. So how do you feel about your well-being in these areas? We would ask you to shade this in indicating how satisfied you are, shaded all the way if you feel really good about your social well-being, which I know I don't right now since we are not able to interact socially in the way we normally would. When I think about environmental well-being, for me, that might be how sustainable I'm being, and also my physical environment. So if I'm not maintaining my office, my tidy desk, that is maybe not the best environmental well-being for me. Am I thinking about my career? That's occupational well-being. Am I doing spiritual practices, whether that's a faith tradition or something like meditation or getting out in nature and connecting with something greater than myself? Am I being mindful of my financial health? Am I spending within my means? Am I budgeting, especially given the circumstances I'm in right now? Emotionally, am I keeping track of my emotions? Am I paying attention to how this pandemic is impacting me? Intellectually, am I still finding things that I find interesting? Am I staying current with events and or exploring other areas that might be that might spark my creativity is a way I like to think about that area. And then physically, am I caring for those basic parts that I mentioned earlier? So you can find this as a PDF on our website. The website lists all the RLCs, Cura is one of those options, and this is linked there along with some reflection questions for you to do. We definitely encourage you to try to do this somewhat regularly. Do it at the start of the quarter, do it at the middle, do it at the end, and see how your well-being is changing over time using these 8 areas. The last thing I wanted to share was just some ideas for how we might hope to connect in the fall. You will take an RLC linked course, which is with other students in Cura. We also recommend that you follow Cura RLC on Instagram. During the academic year, we try to post regularly and highlight students and share information about our theme. So that's a great place to connect with the community. And if we are online fully in the fall, we're hoping to do some fun virtual events that might be small group conversations around well-being. Last fall, I taught a class on our theme and would love to do that in a virtual setting. I'm thinking about maybe some Zoom cooking lessons or exercise groups that you can join. So we're really trying to be creative, but we have no idea what fall is going to look like. So no guarantees yet, but we're excited about exploring the way that this might be able to translate to an online or virtual setting. And I'm going to hand it over to Chan to share some pro tips from us on how to care for yourself during this global pandemic.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a tough time for everybody. And I think the one thing we want to highlight is it's disappointing to not be able to have a normal first year experience coming to college, but we are facing a virus that no one knows, what it can do. There's no cure for it. So this is really the best way to approach this from a public health standpoint, is to just sort of keep people isolated and sort of not interacting too much. So the first thing I would say is, to sort of maintain your own well-being, it's important to know yourself and understand how you might react to things, and that you might be disappointed. So sometimes I think we like to show up and say, I'm okay, it doesn't bother me. But if you don't sit down and really think through, well, how is this affecting me, and how am I supposed to sort of, move forward or process this, then I think it can really catch up with you later on. So I think spending some time alone, reflecting, thinking about how things make you feel, how you can sort of process that emotion. So I was very disappointed when all of this happened. And, I think previous me, when I was in college or even in grad school, would have been like, it's fine, I'm just going to go through with this, no problem. But now it's sort of like, no, like this is really difficult for me to manage, and I'm going to take some time, take a step back and really deal with this so that I can more productively move forward later on. The next thing I would say is to learn how to be vulnerable so that you can connect with others. So again, when I was a college student and even in grad school, you sort of put up this game face, like, I'm fine, I can keep going, there's nothing wrong. But I think the first time when I really just walked up to someone and said, I am really having a hard time with something, I was probably in my late 20s. I'll admit I was a late bloomer in terms of just, being able to recognize that I was having a hard time with something. And I think the freedom that I felt finally just telling somebody that I was having a difficult time and that I just needed help with something, even though it felt scary to acknowledge that and admit that, it ultimately now has freed me from trying to hold on so tight of projecting this image of who I am and that I have it all together. And I think the reality is, in our minds, we might think having it all together means that we don't need help from someone and we don't share these vulnerable sides of ourselves with anybody. But what I've learned is that actually having it together means that you know how to express these things to people and you know how to share parts of yourself that maybe aren't perfect or you're working on or that you're struggling with. And so that has really allowed me to connect with other people and build very meaningful relationships, because it kind of takes that level of connection of a shared almost hardship, or in some cases for grad school, it was kind of traumatic for me. And so sharing these traumas with some of my other grad school colleagues really allowed me to develop these relationships with them that I still lean on them. When I'm upset, I can call them. And before that, I didn't know how to do that because I was just so scared of someone seeing me in a state where I wasn't in control of what I looked like or what I was projecting. And so related to that is you have to know yourself to understand what you're feeling. Some people, they can say things like, I feel bad or I feel good, but emotions are much more complex than that. If I feel angry, that's probably different than if I feel kind of sad. Or if I feel anxious, that might be different than if I feel worried. So if you can better identify what specific emotion it is that you're feeling, you might be able to then figure out better ways to help you process that emotion. So, I know when I'm anxious, writing things down and organizing things into neat little lists will help quell my anxious, sort of oh my gosh, I have so much to do. But, if I'm angry, writing things down doesn't always help me there. Sometimes anger I need to just sit back and chill out for a little bit. And then there's also happy emotions. When I'm happy, I might go outside and go for a walk and it enhances my experience being outside. But, if you're excited, that might mean that there's a different way that you can process that will allow you to feel and enhance that excitement. So I think really spending time understanding your emotions, figuring out a way that you can identify what emotion it is that you're feeling, and really thinking through, how can I sort of either process this, either in a negative, if it's a negative emotion to get through it, or if it's a positive emotion, how can I enhance this? So when something exciting happens, I love telling my friends about it. So I'll text everybody and, get on the phone with somebody, and that enhances how long I experience that emotion, or just getting to share it with other people makes me feel really good. And so I think it took me a long time to sort of learn how to identify my different emotions and how to process them in a way that either productively diffuses a negative emotion or enhances a positive one, so that I feel it more, or I can share it with other people.
I think the resources in residence life are great for helping with this too. Student staff, our community facilitators, us, and then also on campus, CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services, is a great place to do this kind of work, specifically processing and expressing those emotions.
And of course, remembering the basics, you got to sleep, you have to eat well, and you have to move your body every day. So I think in grad school, again, hit this point where I just stopped sacrificing my sleep. No matter what, I would get 8 hours a night. And I know it sounds counterintuitive because you're like, oh my gosh, but I'm not going to get all my work done. But what I found was, once I made that hard, it's almost like taking a risk, oh my gosh, I'm just going to go to sleep and I'm not going to finish this assignment tonight. I'm just going to see what happens. And so once I shifted to this, I prioritize my sleep. I'm actually way more productive because what I realized was when I was operating on, not enough sleep, insufficient sleep, I would obviously make up for that with lots of coffee and caffeine. And it just created this like very anxious, like buzzy, like can't really focus. So I would get my work done, but it wasn't this like focused like work. So now that I actually get enough sleep, I can get stuff done way more efficiently. So, at the time it was like, no, I gotta finish this before I go to sleep. But now it's like, I'm tired. My brain's not functioning at like its most efficient capacity. So I will just go to sleep and I will wake up the next day and my brain will be fresh and I will get that thing done in like 30 minutes versus if I would have stayed up all night until like 2 a.m., taking me 4 hours to get that thing done. Being aware of what you eat. So like I mentioned, I studied public health. I got a master's degree in it, and I actually focused on nutrition and nutrition education. So the importance of eating foods that aren't going to cause like a sugar crash or, spike up your blood sugar and make you all hyper. That's important. And different bodies respond differently to different kinds of food. So if you haven't, spent time sort of like being aware of what kinds of foods make you feel certain ways, I would suggest like, now that we're mostly at home, most of us, and probably eating a lot of our meals inside, really thinking through like, oh, I ate that thing and now I'm super sleepy. Let me try tomorrow not eating this thing or for the next couple of days and see how that makes me feel. And that's actually how I discovered that I had prediabetes, was I started noticing that after I ate certain meals, I would just feel so sleepy, like literally could not keep my eyes open and I would have to take a nap. And so I went to the doctor and said, I don't know what it is. Like, and she was like, well, you look healthy. Like all of your other numbers seem healthy, but let me just run all these tests anyway. And that's how she discovered that my body basically isn't processing sugar when I eat it. So I cut back on my sugar intake and now I feel great. And so little things like that can really help improve your well-being. And moving every day. I will have to admit that when we were in person, I had a busy schedule on campus and I wasn't as good about maintaining like exercise every day. But now that I'm at home, I am definitely integrating physical activity every day. And it definitely gives me more energy and I just feel more balanced overall. So even though it might feel like you don't have time for these things, I think the message I'm trying to tell you is you should make time for these things. And actually, if you invest time in these things, eating, sleeping, exercising, you're actually going to have more energy and be more focused to do all the work that you usually feel like you have too much of to make time for these three things. The next thing I would say is to practice good habits and develop balance. So I have had, and this ebbs and flows, like some quarters I've had very good habits and a good balance. In some quarters, it's just like I have a weird time that I'm teaching. And so it kind of just throws things off. So, this isn't like you're going to establish something now. It's going to, as like a freshman, and then it's going to, you have to stick with it for the rest of your life. But, given what's sort of going on right now, like what's the best way you can develop some kind of a routine using different tools to help you? So, given that we're all working from home a lot, every day kind of feels the same sometimes, I heavily use my Google Calendar to just sort of block out my days and schedule things that I'm going to do. And these habits, take time to develop and practice. And so, if you sort of think as, well, I'm starting college, whether we're online, you're working from home, or we come to campus, it's sort of a shift in a lifestyle, or there's a new role you're taking on. So those are really good opportunities when you're starting something new to sort of, try to develop a new habit. And habits form by repeatedly doing that action. And so, since the pandemic started, like before I would wake up at a different time every day because I, had a different schedule every day. But now I've gotten into this habit of I wake up at the same time every day. I eat breakfast at this time. I do this at this time. And it's really helped me better maintain a balance of trying to account for all of these aspects of my well-being. And so I think, coming up with a habit that works for you. Like I'm not a super early morning person and that's okay. But I think for a time I was like, good people are morning people. I should try waking up at 6 a.m. Nope. Every time I got up, I felt nauseous. I am just not a morning person. And so I think, really understanding who you are, what works for you, and then developing a habit that works for you. So some people are like, I'm a morning workout person. Nope, I discovered that actually after dinner around 8:30 p.m. is when I like to exercise. I turn on my video and that works for me. So it's really this idea of like, you develop a habit that works for you, but it sort of rests on this idea that you kind of have to take the time to figure out what you need and to get to know yourself. This I cannot emphasize enough. So just to give you more backstory, so I, have my undergrad degree. I went to UC Berkeley. I took a couple of years off. Then I got my master's degree at UCLA. And then from there, I went straight into a PhD program at UC Santa Barbara. And the master's and PhD took me 8 years in total. So I was in grad school for 8 years straight. And I think, I really wanted to do well in my program and, wanted to be a good student. And I think slowly in my PhD program, I started kind of giving up these things that I like doing because, again, there's work and I need to spend more time working because working is the only way that I'm going to be successful. And so slowly I stopped going to concerts, which if you asked any of my friends, they would say, wait, what? Chan not going to a concert? Like, how does that happen? I stopped just in doing these things that I enjoyed, like stopped hanging out with my family because I had too much work to do. And so slowly I kind of felt like I was becoming a shell of a person and just sort of like I would wake up and work and then go to sleep and wake up and work and go to sleep. And that's just no way to be a person. I just stopped like engaging. I stopped, like just feeling things. And it was a really sad time in my life. And I think I just got to the point where I remember waking up one morning when I was working on my dissertation and just staring in the mirror and just did not recognize the woman that I saw in the mirror. And what I realized was because I was giving up all of these things that actually bring me joy and that actually energize me, I basically, was just like waking up and doing the motions. And I wasn't even doing a good job at it. I mean, I was making zero progress on my dissertation at this point. And that's why my program took me 6 years just for the PhD. So I think that once I started re-engaging with like, well, obviously this isn't working, just working all the time and not doing anything fun. And so I sort of was like, well, it wouldn't hurt to just try doing the things that I actually have fun doing again. So I started going to concerts, doing things like going to shows on school nights and then just like, going to class the next day. But what I found was like, it's so important to feed your soul, not your professional soul, but like the soul inside of the things that you love. It could be simple things. Like for me, it was, when I was writing my dissertation, I would wake up every morning in a panic and think, oh, I should already be working. But I started sort of saying, you know what, you can quiet down a little bit. What do I really want to do? And they were simple things like, I just want to walk to the bakery down the street and get a coffee and, a pastry and read the paper. And that would take like 45 minutes. And I would let myself do that thing. And then I would come back and sit down and I actually could work. I had focus and I had energy. And so I think this idea of you have to really feed these parts of yourself that aren't work related, because that's actually what gives you energy to keep doing the work. And there's some work that energizes me, like I love working with students. I love talking to students. That gives me energy. But there are other parts of my work, like going to meetings and doing paperwork, where I'm like, this sucks. So it's really like you have to do the parts that feed you to do the inevitable things that will suck that you don't like in your life. But if you don't spend the time feeding yourself, then those things that you don't enjoy doing, that don't naturally energize you, are just going to drain on you. And you're going to become like that woman I saw in the mirror who just like, who was she even? Like no joy, just work all the time. And that's not fun. And that's not a balanced person either.
And I think this might look different now too, right? And some of the things that used to feed our souls aren't available to us because of the situation we're in. So recognizing that there might be some changes there, or exploring new ways of achieving those same goals, and finding what those new things are. We might not be able to replicate exactly what it was, but we might be able to find new outlets for those different opportunities too.
Yeah, I'm just going to add that my new outlet is puzzling. This is like my fourth puzzle in like 2 weeks. There have been different phases of COVID. So there was like bread making and then gardening. I started an herb garden, but now I'm on to puzzling, and it really gives me joy. Like I just, make a cup of tea, and then like 3 hours later, I like finish this 500-piece puzzle and I feel energized. So
That's awesome.
So this piece, I also learned kind of late, but I think, hopefully some of you can relate to this where, there's this little voice in your head that kind of just adds commentary. So it's almost like a TV show where there's like a little voice adding commentary to like the situation at hand. And so, for me, everything I do, there was always this little, my own voice in my head adding commentary. And, for the longest time, probably up until my late 20s, that voice was very negative. It was she criticized the crap out of me. Like every little thing I did, like, I can't believe you did that. That's so embarrassing. Or, oh, I can't believe you did that. That's so stupid. Why did you say that to this person? And I think I started recognizing that actually that's not a good way to have this voice, who basically is going to be with me for the rest of my life, be a negative person voice that criticizes me constantly. And so, I kind of started thinking about that a lot. And I remember reading something that said, we all have this little voice in our heads. Like, have you tried talking? Like, have you tried using this voice while you're sort of talking to yourself, but like talk to yourself as though you're talking to your best friend? So I thought of my friend Lynn, and I thought of the circumstance I was in. And I was like, if Lynn was in this circumstance, what would I say to her? And of course it would be like, it's okay, Lynn. You're going to get through this. Everybody makes mistakes, or like, it's not even your fault. Like so-and-so did this first. And I started realizing that, wow, like I feel like I'm a pretty compassionate person and a good friend to other people, but I am a horrible person to myself. And where does that get me? Like this negativity doesn't get me anywhere. And so slowly I had to, really be like mindful of it, when I was first starting out, but slowly I've transitioned that voice in my head from being, someone who criticizes to someone who actually supports and motivates. And that also has been a huge like game changer in just my everyday life. And even again, like, I think the thing that people don't understand is like, this is not separate from your productivity. Like your whole self is who you bring to the work that you do. And I think when we're so focused on work and we ignore these other aspects of ourselves, the work actually gets slower and, is like of lower quality. So once I started engaging this voice as a more positive sort of cheerleader, I'm actually, again, way more productive, like, have more energy doing the work that I do, even going to the boring meetings that I hate. And it's so counterintuitive. It was so scary to make that step. But once I really did make that shift, and it was like a transition that took a while, but now I feel like I'm, that voice is real friendly to me now. I'm actually more productive, and I feel like I just bring a different energy to my life and my work.
And I think we need that friend right now more than ever, right? Like everything is harder. The anxiety that we face every day is so much higher. And having the same expectations that we used to have of ourselves just isn't realistic. So having your own best friend in your head saying it's okay, you're doing the best you can, I think is even more important now than it ever has been before. This advice is so much truer today, even than I think when we first talked about this, Jan.
Yeah. And I mean, this again relates to something I already talked about, which is you don't have to go through this on your own. I think one of the most powerful things about being, you know, humans who connect with each other is really this idea that like we have shared experiences, and it's through being willing to share those experiences that we can develop these very powerful connections with one another. And so don't hesitate to reach out and ask for support. And if you're not sure where to turn, you know, you can always reach out to Corey or myself. We'd be happy if we're not the person who can help you directly with something, we'd be happy to direct you to another resource on campus. Sometimes reaching out to a friend, you know, even if you are like, oh, I don't know how this friend is going to receive this piece of information that I'm going to give them, you know, you'd be surprised at how people react, because we're all humans and we all experience these things. You know, this is what makes studying people so fascinating for me, is that ultimately these feelings, these reactions that we have are kind of universal. So, you know, if you're feeling anxious about everything going on, chances are you're not the only person. And if you think that you're the only person and you sort of harbor it inside, you know, that sort of, it sort of prevents you from having an opportunity to really have an honest conversation with someone that then actually probably leaves you feeling a whole lot better. And so sometimes when people ask me like, how are you doing? Where, you know, the old me would have been like, I'm fine, you know, move on. Now, if I'm actually not doing so well, I'll say, yeah, today's kind of a bummer. Like I'm really having a hard time with this. And so then that opens up this opportunity for someone to come back and say, do you want to talk more about it? But if I just said, yeah, I'm fine, you know, see you later, then there's no opportunity for someone to then reach out and say, you know, hey, is this something you want to have a conversation with? And so, you know, so don't be surprised if you ever interact with me, you ask me, I'm like, actually, today is a little bit of a bummer, you know, and I actually tell you how I'm genuinely feeling or thinking, because I've learned that that's a better way to connect with people and provide mutual support, is to kind of create this little opening to have a conversation that's more in depth than just a hello, goodbye.
So that is really the end of what we wanted to share with you today, and I hope that that was helpful. One of the things that we have really reflected on is just how relevant our theme is now, as we think about holistic well-being, both in the midst of a global pandemic, but also in a movement for racial justice. Our identities and the ways that we show up in spaces are a huge part of our holistic well-being and can influence our experience in all of these areas. So really everything happening in the world right now is so relevant, and it's more important than ever to care for ourselves and care for one another. So we hope that you will follow our Instagram and be able to connect with you there, but also reach out in the fall. Whatever fall looks like, we are here to support you and are looking forward to having you be a part of our community here in Cura. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye, everybody.